right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So for the camera, if you wouldn't mind, tell us your full name and spell it, and then also, if you can, give us the authorization to utilize the footage in this interview.
Yes, my name is Marco Antonio Estrada. I go by the name of Tony. I am currently the sheriff of Santa Cruz County here in Nogales, Arizona, a border community. I have been in law enforcement in this county, city and county, for over 50 years. 25 years with the Nogales Police Department, and now going on 26 years as the sheriff of Santa Cruz County. And I do allow you to use this interview for whatever means you need to.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the biographical information. I was going to ask you to give us a history on yourself. Is there anything about yourself that you would want the country to know? Anything special, any special achievements, any credentials that make you an expert in the field of what you're doing? Not to mention, you have 30 years, but are you, in addition to that, is there anything special about you that...
I think there's a lot of things that are special with my particular life and profession. I was born on the Mexican side, on the other side of the border. Immigrated family. I was a toddler when I immigrated. Obviously, at that time, it was relatively easy to do that. My father was immigrated previously, and he had a job. All he had to do was get a letter of employment and basically, pay some fees. And then we were immigrated, so it was relatively easy at that time. That has changed tremendously. But as I moved over here, I was about a year and a half old. I've been here all my life. Went to school here. I joined the Nogales Police Department in 1966. I was hired as a patrol officer, dispatcher, jailer, and booking officer, a little bit of everything at an old building down there. Put in 25 years. I raised, went up to the rank of captain, second in command. I was interim chief of police during 3 administrations. Never took the job because it was not very secure, and I wanted to complete my career. After 25 years, I decided that I would retire. The following year, I ran for sheriff in 1992, and I was elected in November of 92, sworn in January 1st of 93. I have been the sheriff since. I am currently serving my 7th term as sheriff here in Santa Cruz County. The record here was 5 terms, so I'm way ahead of that. I'm currently the only Hispanic sheriff in the state of Arizona. I am currently the longest serving sheriff in the state of Arizona, and I'm probably the oldest serving sheriff in the state of Arizona. So I do have a certain, career, I would say career path that I've gone through, and I have been very fortunate and very blessed because I come from very humble beginnings. So when we talk about illegal immigration, I can understand. I have empathy for the people. I understand what they must be going through, having had not a difficult childhood, but really deprived in a lot of ways. But as a result of that, I find myself in this position, which I'm very grateful and very honored, and I have a tremendous respect for this position. And I also feel that because I'm the only Hispanic sheriff, and because I am the chief law enforcement officer in the county, and we have issues with illegal immigration and drugs, that I think I have to speak in a certain way, have a little more compassion to some of the things that are happening along the border.
Thank you for that. So it's fair to say you are uniquely qualified to render commentary and opinion about the activities in this town, along this border community. You've driven every road in this town. You've walked a lot of the areas around the border. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. At least I think I have the most experience, like having been born and raised in this border community and having over 50 years of law enforcement here in this county. And I've seen the dynamics and the evolution of the border. I don't have to be told because I lived it. So I've seen the changes that have come about with regards to drugs and illegal immigration here. So anybody that were to ask me, are you an expert? Maybe not, but at least I've got the experience. I've got the history behind the border.
Okay. So in the month of September, it's fair to assume that border security will be a hot topic nationally. And can you kind of give us, in a nutshell, your thoughts about border security, the current status in the area, just at the very high level?
Well, just let me tell you that there's about 32 sheriffs, 32 counties from San Diego to Brownsville, and we all have different challenges, okay? I would like to think that our challenges are not as big as some other counties, because right now we have roughly about 1,000 Border Patrol agents in this small county. Of the 4 border counties with Mexico, Yuma, Pima, ourselves, and Cochise, we are the smallest, we are the poorest, and yet we have a major corridor of international trade and tourism that come through here. During the winter produce season that they call, we are the largest winter produce producers or food products that are coming from Mexico. Up to 2,000 tractor trailers clear the Mariposa port of entry every day during the produce season. We have the maquiladora industry up on the Mexican side. Raw materials are sent into Mexico, they're assembled and then brought back. So there's that international commerce. We have the Union Pacific Railroad, that boxcars that take products into Mexico, back into the United States, hundreds of them every day. You've got tourism, you've got people, families. There's a very active and very robust border here. And as a result of being a major corridor, because you have a major highway from Sonora connecting with the interstates here, obviously it provides for that international commerce and for a very active border. But it also provides for drugs that are coming through this border, through these tractor trailers, through the boxcars, through vehicles, personal people coming across the border. So it's very active with regards to that. And as far as the illegal immigration, and when you asked about the numbers are down here as far as I know. It's very infrequent that our deputies out on patrol will come across people that are here illegally. It happens, but it's not something that we see on a regular or daily basis. With the 1,000 Border Patrol agents that we have here, that kind of takes care of that problem. Now, in the downtown area, between the ports of entry and stretching miles on the east and the west side, you have the bullet-type fence. And then other places you have chain link fence. Other places you have vehicle barriers. Some places you have nothing. Okay, so it's rough terrain. It's very rough terrain. Now, as far as the illegal immigration and the people coming through this border, it used to be that people would come in through the urban area a lot easier. There were gaps in the fence, and people would come and go, and it was not a problem. And we didn't have the Border Patrol presence that we have now. In about 1994, 95, all of that kind of changed. In 1994, NAFTA, if you remember, kicked in. That displayed a lot of farm workers in Mexico. The peso devaluation, I think about that time, also took a hit. There was an influx of people that were coming across to a point that the community got some black eyes. They said, don't go to Nogales because it's a dangerous place. And at that time, it was risky because a lot of these people would actually run past the car lanes, and sometimes they would take things from the tourists and steal things. So it was a problem. That was about 1994. There were less than 100 patrol agents at that time, but 1995 was a turning point. We had more Border Patrol agents come in, and at that time, the U.S. government, without consulting with government here or even touching base with the Mexican government, in the urban area between the ports of entry, they installed some ugly metal helicopter landing mats that completely shield the vision with our neighbors across the line. Okay, you couldn't see what was happening over there, couldn't see what the people were trying to do, or they were trying to come across. Well, obviously there was an uproar over that, so they eventually took that down. And then it evolved into numerous types of fencing and walls to what we have now, the bullet type fence, which obviously there's some spaces in there where people can smuggle drugs. So Border Patrol came in numbers up to a point, like I said, now we have about 1,000, give or take. They started putting sensors, floodlight, bike patrol, foot patrol, everywhere in the downtown area. Prior to that, the biggest problem that the city of Nogales had and law enforcement had was what we call cross-border crime. People would come to gaps in the fence, cyclone fence, and they come in, they shoplift, they break into the businesses, they break into homes, things of that nature. The majority The people that were in the jail prior to 1995 were Mexican nationals. They were legally or illegally had come over here. Great majority of them for theft, burglary. A lot were in for drugs at that time. But as the Border Patrol agents started coming in, they started putting that wall and all of this tension and security between the ports of entry. That cross-border crime, which was maybe about 70–80% of the people in the jail were Mexican nationals, that almost vanished to the point that we may not even have 5% right now, Mexican nationals that are here. Why? Because they can't afford to climb over the fence, and it's just not practical anymore. So that changed. But in 1995, because of all that security, it made it difficult for the cartels to bring their drugs across. The first drug tunnel was discovered here in Santa Cruz County in 1995. 2 blocks away from the DeCancini port of entry at an old abandoned church right next to what's Burger King now. That was the first drug tunnel. That's what the cartels were saying. Okay, you're making it difficult, just dig underneath. And there is no buffer zone between us and our neighbors. Nothing. I mean, nothing separates us but that bullet fence. So since 1995, there have been over 110 drug tunnels that have been discovered in this small community because the cartels found a way to just barrel in underneath. So we may even have one now, or it may be in construction, but they don't give up. So things started changing about 1995 for the sheriff's office. And when I came in, we weren't too involved in the rural areas, with the exception of our residents. As the Border Patrol came in and as they started putting those barriers or that wall, they started sending people further into the mountains, into the desert, into the canyons of Santa Cruz County. And as a result of that, we started getting involved because all of a sudden we were finding people that died, people that were being assaulted, women that were being raped. At 1 year, I think we had about 24 skeletal remains or bodies that we recovered. People that died because of pre-existing conditions, because it was too cold, it was too hot. Some of them might have been victims of some of the guys or the cartels. So we started seeing all those things come about in the county, and then subsequent to that, they put the checkpoint about 15–20 miles away, so that sent them further out. So it became more difficult and more dangerous and more expensive. So the policy, I guess, was we'll send them out way out there to discourage them, or so we can find them a lot easier, because once they mingle with the residents, it'll be a lot more difficult. But it created a human issue, humanitarian issue, where these people were actually funneled in dangerous areas, not really caring what happened to them, which I thought was wrong. Anyway, the numbers have been reduced as far as the bodies, I think maybe 5 so far this year. It has to do a lot with the fact that the Border Patrol is out there now and probably intercepting a lot of these people, intercepting a lot of drugs, mostly marijuana. There was 1 year, a couple of years ago, I think, where they seized 1 million pounds of marijuana in the Tucson sector, okay, which is the biggest Border Patrol sector in the United States. Up to now, maybe 200, 300,000. Border Patrol will probably give you the figure. So those numbers are down. Now, what happened and what has happened with result of all that security, some of these hard drugs are coming through the ports of entry. And what's happening at this particular port of entry, there are not enough officers to vet people and vet drugs. And I always tell them, if you want to have a success in dealing with some of the hard drugs that are coming through, because they're coming through the ports of entry, you're going to have to put more officers there, because they're catching them every day, but they can't catch everybody. Okay, so it's a big problem as far as the hard drugs are concerned. The marijuana is still coming through. Marijuana, if you're talking about tons, probably coming through the Mariposa port of entry and some of those tractor trailers, mixing them with the produce. Okay, so we're seeing all of those things, but the problem with the ports of entry is that since they don't have enough officers, there's a delay. There's a tremendous delay in getting people and commerce across the border because of the security. They're checking just about everybody that comes through. So that delay is hurting the commerce here. The Mexican consumer is the biggest, payer of taxes here in the city, and the county depends on it. We have about 45,000 people in this small county. Like I told you, it's the smallest county bordering with Mexico, but the most active one. Yuma doesn't have the population on the Mexican side that we have. Pima doesn't have the population that we have. Cochise doesn't have the population on the Mexican side that we have. It is estimated there's 300, 400, maybe, who knows, maybe 500,000 people on the Mexican side, on the other side of the border. When you look at the dynamics of this border community being small and having that many people across, I always tell people we're part of the United States, the richest, most powerful nation in the world, okay? And in our backyard, we have a third world country that's 10 times bigger than we are, okay? So it's a corridor for drugs and people that are coming across. And that is not going to stop. When we talk about the wall, you know, I'll tell you a couple of things about that. Number one, I think this administration is very hypocritical about the position that they're taking. Obviously, it goes well with some people that, you know, we're going to stop everything that's going to come across, especially people. If when you're talking about maybe spending billions of dollars, maybe 20, 25 billions of dollars to build a wall that is not a silver bullet or a panacea, it's not going to solve the problem, okay? And you have pockets of poverty in this country. You know, children sometimes go to bed without eating, families that are living in their cars, talking about vets and homeless people on the street. You're talking about elderly or sick people that don't have health insurance, that may be dying because they don't have the medication they need. And we're talking about spending billions of dollars on a useless wall. It's ludicrous. It is crazy. But that sells with some people. But it is not the answer, and I have always said that it's not the answer, and I'll tell you why. Now, when I talk about illegal immigration and I talk about these people and I show compassion and empathy to them, it's because I understand. I understand their plight. They come from thousands and thousands of miles at great danger and at great expense, and they don't give up. They're determined, they're committed, they're courageous, they're family-orientated, they're religious. They have a lot of qualities that I think we need to embrace. Now, I told you that the United States is big enough, rich enough, and maybe we have about 10 million people here that are illegally. But if they're working, they have families, they're contributing, they're paying taxes, they're not bothering anybody, then why are you going after them and separating them? You know, when I talked about the separation of the children from their parents, to me, that has got to be the cruelest thing that any government can do. And we're not a cruel government, but obviously this administration has not displayed any type of compassion toward these people. They're dispensable. They're soft target. They can find them anywhere, okay? But go after the criminal aliens. Let's do something about, you know, comprehensive, sensible, compassionate immigration. Okay, that what's happening is not working. It goes well with certain people that wall is going to stop everything, and that Mexico is going to pay for it. Mexico can't afford to pay for it. And I'll tell you one thing about the United States, and I think that we made a big mistake. For too many years, we took our eye off of Mexico as a friendly little nation, a friendly little neighbor, and we were looking for problems all over the world. And we neglected, ignored Mexico. And before you know it, Mexico became a corridor for illegal immigration and drugs, out of control. Mexico is corrupt. I'm sorry to say that. That's my country of origin, but I do understand that there's a lot of corruption or a lot of violence out there every day. And so people are leaving. Not only leaving Mexico, they're leaving from South America. They're coming over here thousands of miles. Women, for example, understand and are told that in that journey, besides every other danger, that they probably will be violated. Okay? Some of them are given birth control pills so they won't become pregnant. In spite of that knowledge, in spite of knowing that that's going to happen to them, that they're probably going to sacrifice the only thing that they have, they still come. They still come. And when they make it after all of this trip and all of these hardships, you can only say, you know what? Those are good qualities in people. These are survivors. You know, you and I have something every day. We get up and we have something, whether it's a job, whether it is, whatever it is. These people have nothing. They have nothing but the clothes on their back. That's all they have. And when he says that they're, like President Trump said, they're terrorists, they're rapists and everything else, I took offense to that. I took offense to that because I know that my people are not that. Yeah, we have those kind of people, but so does the United States. When you talk about one incident that happened with a illegal border crosser, I mean, it's blown out of proportion, but look at all the domestic terrorists we have. Kill 15, 20, 30, 50 people. We don't get really a uproar over that, you know. But, you know, I think we've lost focus of a lot of things. And as far as like I said, I think that administration is hypocritical, and I'll tell you why. They have zero tolerance, according to the administration, with illegal border crossers. We will stop, detain, arrest, and prosecute men, women, and children. We will separate them, put them in cages. We don't care. We're going to do that. Zero tolerance. But you know what? They don't have zero tolerance on drugs. They don't. And I can prove that because for years, they have been refusing to file on people that are bringing drugs across the border. At one time, they had a threshold of 500 pounds. They wouldn't file on anybody unless he had more than 500 pounds. So what did the cartels do? They brought in less than 500. Then with an uproar that apparently wasn't a policy, it was just something that they were doing, they dropped to 50 pounds or so forth. Huh? And they would bring in 49 pounds. So, you know, they figured a way to do that. Now, they're still obviously charging people, but they're not charging everybody. So you do not have a zero tolerance on drugs in this country. And in my opinion, the drug problem that we have in this country and immigration, I said immigration, illegal immigration pales compared to the drug problem that we have in this country. It pales because we have 5% of the world's population and we consume over 50% of the world's drugs. We have a major drug problem. And we as a country, they don't want to hear that, but we as a country created the cartels. Mm-hmm. We created them because of the demand that we had and the difficulty that, you know, just regular people would come over and buy drugs and bring drugs across. Now the cartels are involved in that. So they made it a venture, they made it a business and a big business. And the consumer here, you know, is the one that created that. Now, when we talk about illegal immigration, when they started doing all of these things to try to stop people, border fence, everything else, made it more difficult, more expensive, more dangerous, the cartels said, you know what? I think we'll get into that business too. So now the cartels are the human smuggling business. Okay? So as a country, we've created our own problems. Okay? Why? Because there's poverty around the world, persecution, violence, drugs, gangs, and people are trying to find a better life. And they will continue to do that. So that to me, it's not going to stop. Regardless of any wall or anything you put, they will find a way. So I think this is going to be an ongoing situation. It's a phenomenon that's impacting other countries in the world with regards to illegal immigration. Some are more welcoming than others. Unfortunately, Mexico is not. You know, as these people come through Mexico to make their way into the United States, you know, they're being harassed, they're being robbed, they're being threatened, they're being kidnapped. All of the things that Mexico should not be doing, they're doing it. The cartels and everybody else. So we have a problem with regards to that. Like I said, I think we're very hypocritical on how we're doing things, but it sells. It sells to a group of people, and I think that's the only thing that matters.
So, it's interesting. One of the things you just said was that, and I believe it's true, is that the demand from Americans creates an effect on the southern side of the border, supply and demand, to fill that supply. Whether it be people, whether it be drugs, whether it be lollipops, they'll bring it if it's illegal and Americans will buy it. Does the circumstance, there's porous areas of the border. Do those porous areas of the border contribute to the problem, or is it just solely, whether there's a wall or not? The wall may be symbolic of a lot of different things, but because I understand they might use video cameras or other kinds of digital surveillance or whatever. Does that help thwart some of that illegal activity, or does it just continue?
It helps. I mean, it's an option, but it's not a solution. It's a combination of things, obviously. I think you need more technology, obviously. But like I said, I think the problem is that, like I said, we took our eye off of Mexico. That was the biggest mistake we ever made. It's a friendly nation. And I think, and they say, well, what's the solution? I think if you start working with Mexico somehow, trying to Mexico somehow, and try to, mend some of those fences, if you'll pardon the expression, with Mexico, and make it a possibility for people to stay there, and for people to cooperate, and people coming into Mexico from other places, so they can sometimes stem the flow of the drugs and the people that are coming through Mexico. I think that would go a long way. I think not enough of that is being done. I think it's just a finger pointing thing. Mexico, 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 pay the wall, Mexico got all these drugs, Mexico got all these rapists. Right now, Mexicans are the least of the people that are crossing the border illegally. They're coming from South America now, okay? At one time, Mexicans were the number one at that time, okay? To the point that, if you remember, you're familiar with Senate Bill 1070. Senate Bill 1070 was enacted in about 2010 here in Arizona. It was the first anti-immigration bill. And what it required was that local law enforcement would be immigration officers, that we would enforce the immigration law. I was adamant against it. I wasn't the only one, but I was adamant because I had a lot of history, and I'll tell you why. When I got started, we used to see a lot of young people come into the town, go up to the fence at night. A lot of Anglo-Saxons, a lot of students, a lot of college students, I would think, out of state plates. And one of the things that struck me all the time is I used to see a white background with green letters, Colorado. I used to see a lot of Colorado plates, and we arrested a lot of people like that. So I said to myself, isn't it ironic that that's what I saw in the 60s, and now Colorado was the first state to legalize marijuana? I said, it's ironic, but that's the way it is. But anyway, back then, when we would catch these people that would come into town, and it was a small community, one way in, one way out. I mean, we knew who came in, who went out. They went up to the fence. The dogs were going crazy, barking. They'd come, in most cases, right in front of the police department. And we would stop them there. We're wide-eyed. How did you know? I mean, we didn't see any of you guys out there. Say, well, you're not tourists coming in at midnight going up to the fence, so we know you were out for drugs. So we arrest them. We would call U.S. Customs. U.S. Customs was happy to take them because the stats were good for them and everything else. They take the individuals, the drugs in the vehicle, and they file federal charges. All we do was cut a short report, get subpoena, never testify because they got red-handed. So in the 70s, all of that changed. The federal government said, you got them, you keep them. So all of a sudden, all of these people that we were catching with drugs, and all of them were just carriers. I mean, they were a dime a dozen. We were filling the jails, the court calendars, to the point that there was a study that was made by a researcher out of University of Arizona by the name of Tennis Salant. She has retired since. She made the first study in 2000 and 2001, I believe. The economic impact of drugs and illegal immigration on Santa Cruz County taxpayers. It was about $2 million a year that the local taxpayers were paying to deal with things that were spilling across the border illegally, which should be a federal responsibility. We were paying for that, okay? Well, we're still doing it, but not at that magnitude. So when Senate Bill 1070 kicked in, and I had that history, I was telling people, can't do that. There's a lot of reasons that we shouldn't. The relationship that we have, we're going to be profiling, a little profiling. People will not come forward. They will not trust us anymore because all of a sudden we're immigration officers. And then if we were to catch a group in the valleys, in the canyon, and have to bring them in, take them to a hospital or a clinic before we even jail them, it would cost us a lot of money. This small county would go broke. So we can't afford to do that. Well, they would ask me, Sheriff, you seem to be talking like you wouldn't enforce this law. I said, I would. I have a responsibility to enforce every law. But I prioritize. I'm not going to be sending my people out there, looking for people when it's not my job. It should be Border Patrol. I said, my priorities are the people that live here, the people that visit here, whether here legal or illegal, that's public safety. I said, that's my job. If I come across somebody that's illegal, yeah, we will arrest them and everything else. I said, but I'm not going to be, that's not a priority. It's not going to be a priority. So anyway, I had those issues and the question posed to me. But the situation is such that things have evolved, things have changed. The federal government has attempted us to do certain things that we didn't feel were right. Okay, I used to see when I was working for the Nogales Police Department, there's manholes on the sidewalks. Okay, because you see Nogales, Sonora, and Nogales, Arizona is built on an arroyo. The water just flows in between, and there's a channel, a Nogales wash that they call it. Most of it comes from Sonora. There's about 70 storm drains, and there's manholes all over the place. Well, downtown, on one occasion, there was a manhole that was lifted, and I saw 3 generations come out of there. I think it was the grandfather, the father, and the grandson coming out of a manhole. See, 3 generations coming, broad daylight. I mean, they stood out like a sore thumb, and of course they got detained. But you know, the history along the border is that people have been coming and will continue to come, and no wall is going to stop them. Really, nothing will stop them. You talked about the wall and the effect it would have. It is an option. It is an option, but it's not the answer. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the panacea for this problem. Comprehensive immigration reform is what's to be considered. Like I said, I think if we have 10 million people here that are working, hey, I'm not saying look the other way, but don't go out there, you know, plucking them out from business and stores and homes and everything else. That's just not the American way.
Sure. You've answered a lot of my questions with your I was going to ask about pros and cons of immigration. Let me ask you this one. You mentioned that it's other than OTMs are the majority of what you're seeing now. Could you give us kind of a breakdown of allocation, what you think, in 2 ways? First is, what percentage of people are coming over the borders in your county that are drug smugglers, people smugglers? We're talking just the illegals. Families coming up, and then also a breakdown of the nationalities.
You know, I wish I could give you those because we're not really involved that much into it. It's actually Border Patrol with 1,000 agents, like I said, that we have here. They're the ones that have those stats. They're the ones that know where these people are coming from, obviously. But I do know that Mexican nationals are not the number 1 anymore. Okay, they're coming from somewhere else, whether it's families, whether it's young people. In the port of entry, right here at the DeCassini port of entry, my sister-in-law was telling me, I think yesterday or the day before, I don't know when she came through, there's a line of families, mothers, children, just lined up, waiting to be allowed in, you know, into the United States. They're just waiting out there, turning themselves in, you know, literally is what they're doing. So as long as these issues around the world, and they look at the United States as an opportunity to make a life for themselves, it's going to continue, because you see, people have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. Everything they had, they probably sold or, you know, traded or do something with it in order to make it across. So, like I said, the sad reality is that they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming. Drugs are going to keep coming. And, you know, it used to be just marijuana, maybe a little cocaine, maybe a little heroin. Now we got meth, fentanyl. You know, it's crazy what these people in this country will put into their bodies. And the cartels,
they're happy to supply.
They're happy to supply.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the controversial issues associated with unauthorized crossings. I like that term, just unauthorized, because it's
undocumented, I call them.
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever they look. It's more neutral. So we have interviewed a fella by the name of Tim Foley out in Arivaca County. I'm sure Arivaca. also a fella named Jim Chilton. You're familiar with his family out there? They have a large ranch. And I would say, in summary, both of these men are strong advocates for basically what I would call an impenetrable border security, approach. And so much so that they employ their own means of border enforcement. What do you think about that?
Well, they may have a unique situation in their area because it's probably very active with regards to people coming across. But I would like to think that with all the Border Patrol agents that we have here, there really should be no need to do that. And I don't know how much of an impact they would have on these people that are coming across. And I don't know if they have the authority to detain these people, make arrests on these people, because it's a civil immigration violation. So I can understand if people are going through your property constantly, you would have a concern and you would attempt to do that. But I think it's the authority's responsibility to deal with that. Just like if I had an issue and I would expect the neighborhood to take care of the problem, no, I would have to take care of the problem, obviously, with their cooperation. So their approach, maybe they feel that that's their response to that problem, and I'll have to respect that. But I really don't agree that that's the answer either.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about. There was a controversial group called the Minutemen that operated, I guess, in a similar manner. They came down here with the idea that they're going to secure the border. And that led to another event which resulted in some murders. And my understanding, based on some of the talk around the town, was that was a Minutemen or militia gone wrong situation. Can you tell us what you think about? I mean, what were the circumstances surrounding that whole murder, and was your office involved in that investigation?
Probably not, unless you have a specific date and location.
It was in Arivaca.
Okay, now it might have been in Pima County because we share a very small portion of Arivaca.
Okay.
So it might have been up there, but one of the things I have always said, and some of these groups have been here before, and while we're a very welcoming, friendly community, we didn't particularly care that they were here, but I think nobody bothered with them. They weren't very successful because the rhetoric, you're going to go up there, you're going to see people scrambling with drugs and just running across the border, dashing across the border, and that's not the reality. Okay, a lot of the things that are happening with human smuggling and drug smuggling are very subtle. It's not a confrontational, in-your-face type of thing. They do it, obviously, but it's not the type that if you send these groups down here that they're going to have a major impact, because the Border Patrol and local law enforcement is completely overwhelmed, and that's not the case. Okay, so they would not have any impact as far as I'm concerned. But my warning at that time to them were, be careful, because once you come down here and you're not familiar with the dynamics and you really don't know how dangerous these cartels can be, you're going to get into trouble. The cartels will have certain respect for law enforcement because that's our job, and they'll take those losses, okay? But if anybody else interferes, they're going to have a problem. I say, you're going to have a problem. Fortunately, that never happened. They left here, and it never happened. There were no confrontations between them and the cartels. But I think it would have been very dangerous for them, not very productive for them, obviously, with Border Patrol being here. So really, they did not accomplish anything other than get some, newsworthy, things out of it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, let's see, that was, I would say that was kind of a collateral damage associated with what they perceived to be the circumstance in that area. Let's see here. Let me ask you about another thing that came up in some of our conversations with community. They said that there's this interesting dynamic between some of the drug smuggling going north and some of the opportunity that represents for bad guys up north. And there's these things called rip crews that come down thinking that they're going to strip the cartel of their shipments, and it creates contention or maybe even some battling. Can you tell us about, do you know anything about that, and is that a real dynamic that's playing out?
That is obviously something that happens. We're not something that we encounter. It's usually the Border Patrol, obviously, because these are that's the remote areas where a lot of these things are happening. And you remember about 2010 when Brian Terry was murdered, they were up there looking for some of these rip crews and some of these robbers, and that's what happened as a result of that. So yes, we are aware that there are groups or individuals that are ripping, some of these loads off. And obviously that's very dangerous for them once a cartel finds who they are. And that may even be happening in Tucson and Phoenix, where all of these products are landing, and some of these home invasions are happening, some of these abductions are happening, some of this, ripping off of drugs are happening. So it becomes a very delicate battle between the cartels and the people that are trying to rip some of these drugs off. In other words, they're trying to take advantage because they managed to get these drugs across the border, which was difficult enough, challenging enough, and for somebody to just come in and rip them off, that doesn't go very well with them.
I can see that. I don't think getting crosswise with the cartel is going to go very well for anybody.
No, they don't. I mean, you don't want to mess around with them.
Okay. We've also heard that, well, let's see, let's skip to that. Let's talk about Border Patrol in a little more depth. There's some collaboration going on between your office and the Border Patrol. Probably a lot of it, because I'm assuming they have a lot more men out there than you guys could ever dream.
I wish I did.
Yeah. Do you believe that the Border Patrol is effective in your area? There's a policy, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on it, but there's a policy called Defense in Depth. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't ask you about that.
Yeah, no. But, this border county is well served by Border Patrol. Like I said, they got all the boots on the ground, they got all the technology. I think they're doing a good job, and the numbers are down, and the violence is down. We're just not seeing that spilling over to our residents. We do have concern from some of the ranchers, some of these people that go through their property. We don't get those calls on a regular basis. What happens is they usually call Border Patrol because they assume that it's a Border Patrol issue, not necessarily ours.
This is a hot zone, as we understand it, in terms of illegal immigration. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that way. Unauthorized crossings, probably. And then we were thinking we need to find, see, our mission here is to collect news and commentary and opinion from the communities, the border communities that are going to be affected by the policies out of Washington. We pride ourselves on taking the communications from the community and putting them out there for the world to see in an uncensored, unobstructed, not through a news filter. We take the interviews largely and we just put them out there in full, so there's no interpretation. Yeah, so we'd like to visit another couple border communities leading up to September 28th. We just don't know where to go yet.
Yeah, and like I said, of all the border counties, they're all going to be different. The dynamics are going to be different. The challenges are going to be different. I would like to think that this border community and law enforcement is doing an effective job of containing some of those issues, but not completely stopping it.
Yeah. Okay, so I was just about to ask about, so if you had, the Border Patrol's doing a good job, is there anything that they're missing, like that they would really benefit from if the administration were to provide them with that as opposed to a border wall?
Well, I think if there's additional technology, fixed aircraft, obviously more boots on the ground, maybe some fencing where it would be necessary, but here, because it's so rough, the terrain is so rough, there's probably places it wouldn't even be practical to put up any type of fencing, and that's probably where a lot of this activity is going on. I know that in order to curtail or control some of it, they've even had to camp out in certain areas because it's difficult to get to, in hopes that they can deter some of that activity. So I think it's going to be a combination of things. Like I said, the wall may be an option, but it's not the real answer. I think more boots on the ground, more technology would obviously be very helpful. Obviously, you have the checkpoint, which can be effective in reducing some of that activity. Even there, they catch people with drugs and human smuggling and everything else. So it's just not going to stop. And I say no matter how many boots on the ground, how much technology you put in there, we're still going to have to deal with illegal immigration and drugs coming across the border.
Fair enough. Let me ask you, I'm pretty well complete, but I have some questions about victims of cartel activity, basically just, again, unauthorized crossings. There are victims on the southern side, yeah, and they're raped, they're charged money. We've heard that the cartel charges a tariff to pass through the border, no matter what you want to bring. The cartel basically
control.
They're in charge. And we heard a story from a woman who said that she interacted with two ladies that came across the border who had essentially mortgaged their home to the cartel. And then the cartel, rather than actually delivering them to the northerly destination, used them for decoys. And the idea was, well, let's put some drugs on these girls and send them this way, and Border Patrol will intersect them there, and they'll all swarm there, and then all of our guys will go around. And I think that there's victims everywhere. There's families being separated, like you said. There are victims on the southern side of the border. There are victims on the northern side of the border. One of the things we've heard is that there's a tremendous amount of drug use in some of these border communities because it's so available.
Prevalent.
And cheaper because it's not had to make its way to Chicago. Do you agree or do you disagree that, can you tell us in your mind, how do we protect these victims in the future? What can we, granted that the border wall won't stop everything. Putting 10 zillion troops on the border won't stop everything. What do we do as Americans to reach out to these victims and say, we're going to do something here, regardless of what it is, to try and prevent the next two ladies from getting their property mortgaged by the cartel? And then they just steal the ladies' properties and say, oh, if you want to go over again, then you have to do another mortgage.
Yeah. You know, it all starts south of the border. That's where it all starts. And I think that's where it needs to be addressed, whether it's Mexico. Like I said, Mexico's a major corridor for a lot of these things that are coming through, the drugs and the people. They're flowing in through Mexico, whether it's through Texas, New Mexico, here, or California. Something has to be done by the government here to deal with Mexico. Whatever it may take to get Mexico and convince Mexico to do something about these people that are coming into Mexico and trying to make their way into the United States. Something has to be done. Unfortunately, the corruption in Mexico, what they do with some of these people that are coming from other countries, you know, they victimize them. They victimize, in spite of that, they still keep coming. And then they use them, the cartels use them, everybody uses them. I mean, they're pawns in all of these kind of things. But I think Mexico is our closest, I would say, ally. And at the same time, it's our closest challenge with regards to how we're going to deal with all these drugs and people that are coming through Mexico into the United States. So Mexico, in my opinion, is a crucial point of trying to solve or address this problem or minimize the problem. Something has to be done to convince Mexico that they need to help us, and we need to help them in order to do that.
A final question for you, sir. It's sensible to believe that we're, on September 28th, we're approaching a fork in the road for the country. Border fencing has been approved by Congress in prior years. Border funding has never occurred. And now Donald Trump has essentially more or less drawn the line in the sand, or the red line, whatever you call it. And he's saying, now I'm going to pick this time to pick this battle, and this is when it's going to happen. Arguably, he's one of the most, he's one of the biggest bullies in Washington, arguably, right? Ever. If Donald Trump, in all of his, border security and border wall rhetoric, is unable to extract border funding from the American people through Congress on the 28th or sometime thereafter. So one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to get what he asked for or he's not. Can you kind of tell us, from your vantage point, what does America look like after September 28th? Either the border wall and the border funding goes, or it doesn't. And do we invite more victims if it doesn't? Or do we invite more problems if we do? How do you see that playing out post-September 28th?
Again, I don't think the wall is going to be the answer to it. And what the president is thinking is extortion. It's extortion. I mean, he's known to do a lot of things with the law. And I think it's extortion. You either do what I say, or I'm going to withhold the money from you. He's extorting the American people. It is not his money. It is the people's money. He should be a good steward of the people's money. He's talking about penalizing people, and yet he's spending millions of dollars going on his golf tours, spending money like crazy, but then he's trying to limit, like the federal employees. I'm not going to give you a raise, okay? But he doesn't mind traveling all over the place, spending millions and millions of dollars. So it's very hypocritical. It's very hypocritical, and I look at that threat as extortion of the American people. If you don't do what I say, you're not going to get anything. I'm closing the bank. I'm taking away your checkbook. So, and it's unfortunate that there are people that believe that he should be doing that because it's a minority, but it's a vocal minority, unfortunately. It is wrong. I think it's terribly, terribly wrong. He should not be using that as a threat. because he can't get, he's pouting, he can't get what he wants, so I'm going to take away everything I can from you. I don't think that's a grown-up approach to this.
How do you think the community, how does the community around you react to all the talk about the wall?
Well, being that we're predominantly Hispanic, and obviously our neighbor by the same token, we take offense to it. We take offense that they feel that is the only solution to this problem. It's very. I'm trying to think of the word that says, it's ludicrous, it's ridiculous to think that is going to be the answer. We all understand that it's not the answer. I think he even understands it's not the answer, but he doesn't care. The people here are against walls. They're against separation. They understand that there's a phenomenon of illegal immigration, but they want it to be addressed in a very comprehensive and compassionate way. That's all everybody is looking for. Be compassionate in what you do. Have a little empathy in how you do it. Okay? Don't marginalize these people as being other than less than everybody else.
Okay, and then okay. And I guess I just have to steal one final question.
and then the hate mail comes in.
No, you're an important voice in this debate. Very few people in the country with the kind of experience in these areas of the country that have the weight of their opinion when they weigh in on this. So you're Sheriff Tony Estrada. What message does Sheriff Tony Estrada have for the American people as we approach the 28th regarding the border wall?
I guess my message to the American people is, like I've said it before, that is not the answer. Let's look at having a little bit of compassion, a little bit of understanding, of trying to come up with a solution of immigration reform that is fair not only to us here in the United States, but for people that might want to come over here to the United States. Let's look at the bracero, the gas worker program. Let's look at things like that. If we need some of that labor, let's provide that for the Mexican people so that they can come and work here where nobody else wants to work. In the past, the growers up in California were willing to pay $15, $20 an hour if they would go up and pick their products. They wouldn't last a day out there. And these are people that are used to hard work. So I think it's important that we have programs like that, comprehensive immigration reform, so that we can allow a steady flow of people to come over and maybe take some of that pressure out of Mexico, these people that need to leave, and then work closely with Mexico so that we can keep those people there, whatever it is, improve their industry. Mexico is a very rich country in agriculture and a lot of things, okay? I think there's a lot of things that can be done in Mexico to make people stay there. Maybe their cost of living, their wages, things of that nature, more employment, more infrastructure. There's like infrastructure over here. Our infrastructure is falling apart. If you really want to keep people jobs, spend money on infrastructure. I mean, it goes a long way. It improves commerce, improves everything else. So I would like to think that, number one, comprehensive immigration reform with a lot of compassion and empathy and understanding to the American people that's what we should be looking at, and that we should not be looking at shutting down the government as a way to accomplish something that's not going to solve the problem.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated. Well, so we have this video platform. We'll be taking this footage will go into two places. One, it'll go onto the video platform probably in its entirety is what I'm thinking would be the right thing to do. And then also we'll have some kind of documentary that is published post, it'll be post September 20th because we'll have to follow the story from there as well, but it should be out before January, I guess, is what they're talking about. So.
Well, send me the link or whatever whenever you have it. and we'll see what the reaction is. But I think, in closing, I think that as having been immigrated as a toddler, having come over here and having been given the opportunity to be where I am now, obviously that was something I never dreamed of. So I was given that opportunity, and I think I was given an opportunity for a reason, maybe so that I could speak in behalf of the people that are less fortunate, to those people that don't understand that there can be human suffering, and they don't care. I think it's important that I send that message, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I may not want to enforce the law, that I don't want to provide, public safety. I think I am. By being a spokesman for that, I think I'm being a realist in telling the people, you have to address this in a different way. You can't force your will on people and expect people to back off. They're not going to do it.
Fair enough. All right, thank you. You guys need any B-roll?
Just a little bit on the side.